Allow us to set the stage on this Thursday morning, live right here on the early line for game number 5 of the Western Conference Finals tonight in Minneapolis as the Timberwolves return home, having staved off elimination and a sweep in game number 4 in Dallas. The T-Wolves reward having to do so once again as a 4.5-point favorite at home tonight in the Twin Cities with an over-under of 209 and a hook. On the other side, the hungry Dallas Mavericks as an underdog. One win away from their third ever berth to the NBA Finals in franchise history. Their first in more than a decade since they won the Larry O'Brien Trophy back in 2011. Those are the stakes for tonight in Minnesota. Again, the Timberwolves, a 4.5-point favorite. The total at 209 and a hook. How do you see game 5 of the WCF playing out?
You know, normally, from what we're hearing and also what the anticipation is, you take a look at the Timberwolves as a favorite. Let's just call it 5 here. So they should win this game based on the odds and have a game number 6, which will be played back in Dallas. Now, here's the issue. I've been saying the past 2 days, like, oh, man, don't leave the Dallas Mavericks out of this. They can easily go into Minnesota and pick up a victory. I didn't figure at the FanDuel Sportsbook, though, Ben, 78% of the tickets coming in on the Dallas Mavericks. So now we turn into that famous public loves a good dog getting 4.5 points when I wasn't even trying to pay attention to see where these splits were going and thought the Dallas Mavericks were the right side. Now, as I take a look at some of these numbers, it might have me rethinking exactly what's going to take place and maybe should we be going after the Timberwolves? Because as we know, watching the money flow in, if that line opens up at 4.5 and it's still sitting at 4.5, and you have about 80% of the tickets coming in on one side, and that line isn't going anywhere, that's certainly something to keep an eye on for that game tonight. So for me, liking the Mavericks, now seeing those numbers, cloudy brain syndrome right now for your boy.
That smells a little bit fishy on the Great Lakes up there in Minneapolis. And if you remember what the graphic indicated yesterday, it was only a 4-point number in favor of Minnesota. The hook has been added on despite heavy public betting on the Dallas Mavericks. Very intriguing. Minnesota, 4.5-point favorite for game number 1. The Mavs win outright as an underdog by 3. Minnesota, even a greater favorite for game number 2, laying 5, the largest spread in the T-Wolves' favor throughout this postseason run. The Mavericks, courtesy of the Luka Doncic dagger in the final 3 seconds, win outright as an underdog as well. So it shouldn't be a surprise then, necessarily, DRS, that the Mavericks are getting the public love because this postseason, as an underdog, Dallas in these playoffs, 5-1 straight up. They have been incredible as an underdog, including both of the opening 2 games of this Western Conference Finals set against the Timberwolves. Meanwhile, Minnesota, booked as a favorite in every home game. The only time the Timberwolves have been booked as a favorite throughout this postseason, just 3-4, both straight up and against the spread, meaning when they win at home, they cover the number, but they have a losing outright record as a home favorite throughout this playoff run. I do wonder, in the 4 games we have seen so far in the Western Conference Finals, the winning team has also covered the number. 3 of the 4 games, the underdog, Dallas in games 1 and 2, Minnesota in game 4, the Mavericks as only a 1.5 favorite in game number 3, winning by 9. And oh, by the way, that 9-point margin, the largest we have seen out of the 4 contests in the WCF. All 4 games decided by single digits, 3 of the 4 by 5 points or less, which initially had me believing, Donnie, that I actually kind of lean with the Timberwolves winning this game outright, staving off elimination once again, and forcing a game 6 back in Dallas. But maybe the Mavericks keeping it within the margin, even though the margin is not necessarily large, at only 4.5 points. But that public fish starting to look like we need to back the Timberwolves.
Yeah, it does. And also, when we had Coach on yesterday, figuring how this series could possibly turn out. Could we get to a game number 7, which again will be home in Minnesota? But the question mark is going to be really, if this game moves to a game number 6, is the Minnesota Timberwolves going to be able to perform in Dallas when we've already saw Dallas clinching against a higher seeded team in game number 6 in their own building? But there are a lot of question marks coming into this because, again, getting back to the conversation yesterday where you had a chance to say, okay, this wasn't a guy that was unheralded stepping up and claiming his spot, saying, I'll rescue this team. It was the superstars of the Minnesota Timberwolves coming up big in the biggest moments when they hadn't done that just yet in this series. So that momentum turning over should be like, okay, Anthony Edwards has his feet under him here finally in the Western Conference Finals. Karl-Anthony Towns also has the same. Let's see if they can duplicate what they did in Dallas, because if they do that and pick up a victory, they're going to have a lot of confidence rolling into game number 6 saying, yeah, this is the way we were supposed to play for game number 1. I understand we blew game number 2 in our own building, but that's not going to happen again. I'm just interested to see why we're so happy here as a public betting on Dallas. Is it the points? Is it they think they can win this game? Or maybe we're thinking it was a fluke and Karl-Anthony Towns goes back to being 0 for 8 from three-point range and Anthony Edwards isn't ready for the big moment yet. That's an intriguing number because what you anticipate, Ben, is right. 2 good basketball teams. Most people usually lean towards the home court. Maybe we get 60% of the tickets, 55% of the tickets here on a public favorite. Now you have close to 8 out of 10 tickets coming in on Dallas. No real line movement in this spot. That's an interesting equation to see if it plays out tonight.
You mentioned them, so let's show them, huh? Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns, their points props for game number 5. The Ant-Man actually up by a point, 28 and a hook. Cat at 20 and a half. Of course, the two combined for 54 points in game number 4. By far their best performances throughout the Western Conference Finals. And for Karl-Anthony Towns, his first time scoring 20 plus or even above 15. He hit 4 triples, including a couple of clutch deep shots late in that fourth quarter. 20 and a half his number. He scored 25 in game 4. 28 and a half for Anthony Edwards. He scored 29 in game number 4. Getting to the rim once again for Anthony Edwards. And Donnie, you were all over it, thinking that Anthony Edwards was going to flirt with a triple-double, and boy, did he. Just 1 assist shy of that triple-double. He has had at least 7 dimes in all 4 games of the Western Conference Finals. He has also gone over his rebounding prop tonight, which is listed at 7.5. In 2 of the 4 games, he had double digits in game number 4. We said it entering game 4. If Minnesota was going to force a 5th game, if they were going to avoid the sweep, they needed their superstars to step up. I would assume we have the same sort of consideration entering tonight's 5th game.
Absolutely. And if you are looking at that triple-double market, you saw last game on the road, Anthony Edwards at game time at the FanDuel Sportsbook, Ben, 29-1 for a triple-double. Now he's back home, flirted with the triple-double the past 2 games. He's dropped to 10-1 in that market price. Luka Doncic, who did get the triple-double in the last game, he was around a 3-1 price. He's now closer to a 4-1 price at a plus 390 for a triple-double. We'll see if that happens there. I don't know if I'm as high on Anthony Edwards because really sometimes it's number specific. When you see a number like, wait a second, this guy could get a triple-double and it's around 30-1. We're so used to seeing like Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, plus 210, plus 250, 3-1 going, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. And it's also odd that Anthony Edwards, I don't believe, Ben, even had an assist at halftime in game number 4 and finished with 9. So you might think to yourself, boy, that was a really bad beat. He had 9 rebounds and 9 assists, entering into the second half. That wasn't the case here. He really turned on the gas pedal late in that basketball game to even get close. We'll see if he does that, but I'm not as high on the triple-double as I was in the previous games. But if we're just looking at superstar power at this point, I mean, who's toe-to-toe? You could basically say right now, if you get a better game out of Luka Doncic than you get out of Anthony Edwards, that's probably going to be it. But again, having faith in Anthony Edwards, finally seeing the light in that previous game, I expect a big-time performance out of the kid in this game tonight.
Yeah, the PRA props would make a ton of sense. Luka Doncic did record a triple-double in game number 4, his second of this set. However, both Luka and Kyrie stayed under their points props in game number 4 for the first time in this series. Puck talk? No, more NBA talk next. Live right here on this Thursday on the early line. Tonight is game number 5 of the Western Conference Finals in Minneapolis. Sure, the Timberwolves did not get swept, meaning that both conference finals rounds did not end in only a 4-game sweep. But just because they force a Game 5, does that mean this series has any life? DRS entering game number 4. The Dallas Mavericks were a minus 2,500 favorite to win the Western Conference. Dallas still remains a hefty favorite at minus 560. But I bring up these series odds to make this point, as we have shared. This series, the 156th time in NBA playoff history, a team has taken a 3-0 series lead in a best-of-7 set. That includes what we saw between the Celtics and the Pacers, and including Boston and Indiana in the ECF. In the previous 155 times, the team that has held a 3-0 series advantage has won the series. Only 15 times in the prior 155 has a team even won 2 consecutive games to force a Game 6, which is what Minnesota is attempting to do tonight. So if the odds track and the Timberwolves at least win outright as a home favorite, it will be something that has rarely happened in the history of the NBA postseason.
Yeah, and we'll see if we even can make it to a game number 6. And probably a lot of those series were a sort of role reversal, right? Where you had the sweeps typically coming from the higher seeded team, which means they won the first 2 games on their home court. Then they won the next 2 games on the opponent's home court. But if they didn't, let's just say we get that one last stand and we force a game number 5, typically goes back to the home court and they close it out. That's why we don't ever get to a game number 6. So a little bit of a role reversal the way this series is playing out. But based on the odds, we are expecting to have a game number 6 in the Western Conference Finals. We'll just see how it plays out tonight, because obviously on paper, if you're just going by the odds, check it off. The Minnesota Timberwolves should win this game. But then again, if you were doing that in game number 4, it should have been the Dallas Mavericks ending that series. And I actually thought that series would end in a sweep where Dallas would handle home court. They weren't able to do so, and here we are tonight.
The spread's in Dallas's favor at home in Texas, just 1.5 in both games 3 and 4. Yes, not very large spreads in their favor, not very hefty home favorites, but the Mavericks would be a home favorite with the potential to clinch a series even if they drop 2 straight to Minnesota. Why do I bring that up? Because right now in the correct score market for the WCF, the Mavericks to win in 6, 4 games to 2, plus 145, a number that I think you should jump on if you believe Minnesota wins game number 5 tonight, because you would have the Mavericks as a home favorite with a plus money line ticket ipso facto. All right, more news around the association. Brian Keefe, as we shared in Washington, has the interim tag removed. He is now the permanent head coach of the Wizards, but maybe more importantly, the head coaching news yesterday in the association. Ty Lue agrees to a 5-year, nearly $70 million extension with the LA Clippers to become one of the highest paid coaches in the NBA, and a 4-year tenure in Los Angeles will continue at least for the foreseeable future. Donnie, you made this point when we discussed this earlier. Bright pastures, you would think, for the Clippers entering next year, at least monetarily and investment. They move into the Intuit Dome, the state-of-the-art facility that Steve Ballmer has building up in the city of Angels. That starts next year. The Clippers get their own home. The Clippers have a head coach they can rely on with a sturdy background. And now the question is, who do the Clippers have on the floor playing in L.A. next season?
Yep, next year, getting back to Inglewood. Yes, there we go. And the Intuit, that place is really interesting. And I want to see if that's one of those future arenas where everybody tries the model. Because when you talk about a guy that's been in the tech industry for as long as their owner has been with all of that money, he's going to press the boundaries. And we'll see if it works out in their favor. But yes, Inglewood always up to no good typically with the Clippers. Why? Because they never win anything. But I do think they have a very good basketball team and a very good coach, which puts you in the mix on a year-to-year basis. I don't have any issues with Tyronn Lue making that much money, because it's not a man, now we can't bring in another basketball player. No, there are no restrictions on coaching staffs and how much you can pay them in the NBA. They got their guy. They wanted to keep him there. They wanted to keep him happy, and they did that. So continuity in the head coaching staff sometimes is just as important as the team itself, Ben.
And I don't think there's any restrictions on the wallet of one Steve Ballmer. So
No.
Ty Lue, in his first year at the helm in Los Angeles, after winning a championship, of course, with LeBron James in Cleveland. Producers, please check that. Make sure I got that bit of info right. Ty Lue led the Clippers to their first ever appearance in the Western Conference Finals, something Doc Rivers failed to do when he had Lob City back in the day. That was 2021. The Clippers into the WCF, but not into the NBA Finals. Then they lost in the play-in tournament the year following, and then 2 first-round exits the last 2 years, where availability and health has been the question. Kawhi Leonard, if he doesn't want to play in a playoff game, he doesn't play in said playoff game. We don't know exactly what the future holds for Paul George this summer. The rumors have already started with Paul George in a certain city that Donnie Rightside loves. Philadelphia. Could PG be on his way to Philly? What is next for James Harden? Many questions to answer for this Clippers team that has been assembled to win not a playoff series, not a second-round playoff set, but a Larry O'Brien trophy, and they have failed to reach that mountaintop.
Yeah, it feels like they need Tyronn Lue to be a player coach out there, which means he can actually suit up because half his team doesn't like to suit up in the playoffs due to injuries at this point. And changes in the future could be. I like the team, and I would be very surprised, to be honest. Like, unless Paul George says, I just want to get out of Los Angeles, which he fought so hard just to get to Los Angeles from OKC, there's a lot of money around. Those guys are going to keep happy with big paychecks here. I think they keep the band back together, but also, what does that mean? First round exit again next year? Because something has to change on that basketball team. You can't just bring everybody back and pay everybody like, yeah, you know what? This is our year. Because when the playoffs start and James Harden isn't there and or Paul George or Kawhi Leonard, who always likes to dip out in the playoffs, something's got to give here. But I do like the coaching move to keep Tyronn Lue there. But the players are the ones that have to show up in the playoffs, at least be ready to play.
Yeah. Listen, if they keep the gang together, the odds are going to be optimistic. I would guess LA third, fourth best price to win the Western Conference crown. Quickly, 20 seconds left in this segment. Trivia question. Where did Tyronn Lue play his college basketball?
I don't even know.
Why am I asking you?
I had no idea.
The Nebraska Cornhuskers has his jersey retired.